Hello and welcome to AXSChat. We're delighted to be joined by Mike Tholfsen today. Mike works for Microsoft and is responsible for a product that is very close to my heart in that it's the learning tools which are designed to help people with dyslexia and other language issues. So Mike, tell us a bit about the work that you're doing and about yourself. This is by the way, great stuff that you're doing. So I'm very excited to have you join us today.
Thanks. So yes, I work on the Microsoft education team. I'm on the product and engineering side, and I do a lot of work around inclusive classroom is kind of the holistic way we talk about it. And so for that inclusive classroom, I do Microsoft learning tools, like you mentioned. We also think about inclusive writing. We just announced more recently we're getting into some math, as well as inclusive student and parent communication and focus. Those are sort of the categories. And then I also do stuff with OneNote in education, sort of separate from inclusive classroom. That's my day job. And yeah, I've been at Microsoft my entire career, over 20 years, and I've been working in the education space probably 12 to 13 years at this point.
Okay, fantastic. And can you tell us a little bit about what, for those that don't know, and for those of us that are a long time out of education, what are learning tools, and what are some of the cool things that you can do with learning tools?
Well, the overall brand or concept, Microsoft Learning Tools, there are a set of tools, and actually the background was there was a set of people inside the company. I was part of a small group a few years ago. We took place in a Microsoft hackathon, which is this event 1 week out of the year where anyone in the company can work on any project they want, any passion project, and you can work with any person on anything. And so I actually got pulled into a group where we had a speech pathologist, we had reading experts, font experts, accessibility experts, and we said, what if we took the latest science and research around reading, but we focus inclusively on dyslexia as a core customer persona? We said, let's see what we can do just in this week using the latest technologies and the science we know around reading and see what we come up with. And the idea was, hey, if we can focus on dyslexia, but inclusively, our hypothesis is that this will help lots of people with reading, not just people with dyslexia, but it'll help all sorts of people. And so we built this little experimental add-in, and I'll explain a little bit more of what that does when I'm done. But we took this add-in in the hackathon a few years ago, and then we started working with teachers and schools and other experts and started iterating on it and improving it, and we started getting a lot of feedback. And then ultimately, over the last few years, we've built these technologies into our mainstream products like Office and Windows, and these are available for free. But in terms of what it does, it has a set of techniques. It has some basic text-to-speech and word and line highlighting just built in. And while that's not new, one of the things that we say over and over again is that we say it's built in, mainstream, non-stigmatizing, and free. If I'm using Word and all of a sudden I can use text-to-speech on anything, that's a great benefit that helps everyone or anyone who wants to use it. So we have text-to-speech. We also have the ability to change the way the page looks. So things like the ability to increase line and letter and word spacing, so reducing visual crowding, you can do really easily. We have the ability to change the background colors. Some people might prefer different colored backgrounds while they're reading, and so you can choose any of those colors, and they're fine-tuned for accessibility standards and contrast. You can make the text much bigger or smaller, so visual impairments or short line mode or other places. And then we have grammar options, so the ability to break all the words on the page into syllables with a single click, and that's using our cognitive services backend. And things like highlighting different nouns and verbs and adjectives, and being able to focus the lines, the line focus that can reduce distractions, and then things like a picture dictionary. So that's a summary, and we're trying to build that into as many products as we can and make it available on many platforms as we can.
Considering all, sometimes the resources that schools have, sometimes they don't really have, technology, something that many of them struggle with. What type of work are you doing, especially with teachers in order to help them within the space of the classroom to make sure that the students can take advantage of those tools, because sometimes they might not have time to go through them, and they might have the software, but they don't know how they could benefit from it.
That's a great question. So in terms of teacher awareness, teacher training, student awareness and training, we're working on that right now. And there's a set of things we have, and there's more things we're working on. So for example, we've created a whole set of professional development courses for teachers, and we've got really short versions, we have medium versions, we've got really big versions. So we kind of let the schools decide what they want to do, because some schools don't have the time to do an all-day training. And honestly, a lot of our tools don't need an all-day training, but if you want to go really deep, maybe. But we also have bite-sized chunks, so just a couple of minutes worth, or a 5-minute demo, or a 30-minute training. And then in addition to online courses, we have courses that can be downloaded and done in the school, so any educator can do trainings within the school, so it's prepackaged and ready. We have partner training companies. We have Microsoft stores, although in the UK, they're not, we haven't rolled out all the stores in the UK, but in the United States, we have educator trainers that can visit schools. But for the educators themselves in the classroom, what we found, a lot of it because our learning tools are designed to be able to be used by anywhere from kindergarten to 3rd grade to 6th grade to high school and everywhere in between. The user interface is designed to be fairly straightforward. And what we've been finding is that oftentimes an educator will just have to show a student how to launch them, not even go into in-depth training. I mean, many educators might do that. I've seen teachers sit down in front of the class and show every kid in the class, okay, here's their immersive reader button. Here's some things you can do with it. And the best way I've seen it done is where they don't just say, oh, these 3 people are going to use the immersive reader and all the other kids aren't. It's actually rolled out as, here's some tools that any of you can use, and they can help you when you're reading. And you can use this way, you could use it that way, and then let the kids choose, and they can personalize. But they're designed to be pretty easy to use in terms of adoption from students. It's more about the teacher awareness and getting, I think, like you had said, getting the teachers aware and making them feel comfortable to be able to roll them out. On the student side, it's typically, they pick it up almost instantly.
I think that actually this is something that was discussed in a meeting I was in yesterday, where we were talking at a university level about actually it's not about teaching the students, it's about teaching the teachers a lot of this stuff, because they're not necessarily on top of the technology, they're not necessarily aware. If anything, it can all be a bit overwhelming, and certainly as we're certainly this is something we see as technologists, even outside of education, but in the workplace, the pace of change is accelerating, and yes, the friction to learn these new skills, to adopt the technologies is sometimes great, and even though this stuff may help us, it's finding the time to step back and learn how to use it and how to integrate these things that can be of real benefit to you into your way of working and your routines and everything else. So the adoption's an interesting one. I think that making it ubiquitous helps. So I'm really pleased to see the journey from a sort of confined tool as it's started to spread into other parts of the Microsoft feature set. Long may that continue. I want to see it everywhere.
Oh, it will, my friend.
Yeah.
Believe
so I'm very keen for that, because one of the questions that I've asked is like, why is it all right to have narrator, ubiquitous, which deals with the needs of one set of people, but not something that does an equally great job for another set of people, which are many times as numerous. So it's that ubiquity is really important. The spread of the tools is for me a really good sign. I'm really interested to see some adaptations to as we transition from schools to workplace, I think the stuff that you've got in Edge is looking slightly different to the stuff that you've had in the education sector, and I think that that's going to help adoption as too. I'm with you 100% on the idea that it's destigmatizing, because one of the things that we've seen time and time again is that it's really hard to ask people to declare about disability and to actually stand up and say, this is something I need, and this is going to help me do my job better, and by the way, this is me having a disability. Those are big, scary things for people to do. In fact, they're less scary in an education environment than they are in a workplace environment. I think that in education's set up to be more inclusive. It's by no means perfect, but it's set up to be inclusive. Certainly in the UK, they're marked on results and how people have achieved and stuff like that. And so they're incentivized by the way the system is structured to be inclusive and to provide the aids that people need. My feeling and experience is the business world in general is a little bit more brutal than that. um, and real life is a little bit more brutal than that, and that there are performance issues and shareholder value issues and all of the rest of it. Now, Hector and Jenny Leifari and I will all go out, and Debra will all go out and tell business, hey, actually, putting these tools in place will improve your business performance, but there has been this perception that doing accessibility is expensive. And I'm sure that that's something that you would have come across previously as well. That the assistive technology is expensive and implementation difficult and all the rest of it. So how do you address those kind of prejudices against technology? Not prejudices against people, but prejudices against inclusive technology.
Well, what's interesting is, at least for me, I can only speak for myself.
Sure.
In both schools, and I've worked with some businesses and definitely higher education, I agree that there's a perception that, oh, this assistive technology that you're about to show me or talk about clearly will be charged a lot of money for this. And when they find out that there's no money involved, it's actually built in free in many cases, there's no extra cost, there's no extra licensing, they have a little bit of shock in a positive way. But B, that actually makes, because it's built in and free, it makes it much more amenable to deploy broadly. We've run into districts and even some companies that say the fact that it's just built into Office actually makes us want to deploy we have this, we just haven't updated to the latest versions because for various reasons, but it actually drives them to want to move forwards, because the inclusion part means anyone can use this. I mean, just to give an example from the workplace, I got a mail from a CIO of a large company who's been using the learning tools built into Microsoft Word. And it was essentially a thankful mail where he said, kind of like you had said, and I'm not going to name any names or companies, but he had said it's not something that he'd shared broadly in his job, but when he found these tools built into Word, and he's dyslexic, it was hugely helpful. And so it's similar in schools, where it's not that every dyslexic in the education system either has been identified or has been in a place where they even know in many cases. And the fact that at least in the US, I can't speak to the UK, but in the US, there's many states and districts that even the word dyslexia and what it is and what it means is not agreed on, unfortunately. And so when these tools are available, like whether you say you're teaching a set of dyslexic students or whether you're saying you're teaching students who have reading challenges and you're not using the words dyslexia in your district for whatever reason, these tools can help. And because they're built in and they get broad adoption and they're free, all of a sudden it might be the opposite, where they say, oh, we were paying a lot of extra money and it was complicated to install and license and all these other things for some other pieces. And now some of these things are built in and free and available to anyone. it has you have to break through the initial assumptions, like you had said, that, oh, it's going to be really expensive and complicated, and gosh, this is just hard. When they find out it's part of Office or Windows and it's multi-platforms, iPads and Macs and browsers as well, usually the response is, oh, well, how can we get this deployed as fast as we can? So the initial response is a little bit of an assumption of maybe the past, but once you break through that, a lot of goodness usually comes from it.
And I have observed a few scenarios where in schools here in Ireland where kids with dyslexia will say, they can use this special software, and we are putting them in a position of advantage regarding other kids, when in fact you are just putting in the same situation than the other kids, in order to be able to compete and to do their work. So if I read it right, in the model that you are pursuing, that somehow is going to democratize the school, because they are available to everyone. You don't need, it's not just for one, it's for everyone. So that thing about saying, we are giving an advantage to a group, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense anymore.
Exactly. And it's not just learning tools, it's in like speech to text. We have speech to text built in all of our software now. And we're rolling out lightweight word prediction built into Windows that's available to anyone. Whether you're dyslexic or dysgraphic, or whether you broke your arm and you can't type, speech to text, it turns out, is really helpful. And so, like you said, when it's built in and mainstream and non-stigmatizing, a lot of those barriers seem to start falling down. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on, Antonio.
You are currently doing this mainly in the English language. Am I correct?
Well, Antonio, the good news is that you're not correct.
Okay.
We're doing it in many languages.
Okay.
Microsoft Learning Tools, for example, is available in, I believe, over 45 languages. And speech to text is more limited now. It's in about 9 languages. We hope to be creating more and bringing it more in the future. But part of our goal is global scale. Like, one of the benefits that I'm so excited about working at Microsoft is that our vision is to empower every person on the planet. And that means not just empowering English people who don't have dyslexia. It means empowering every person on the planet. And so that means all languages, that means all abilities, that means everyone. And so that's the scale that I think our company can help bring. Now, it won't happen overnight that we get every single language and every single platform, but that's our goal.
Excellent. And I'm a long-term speech-to-text user. I actually started my accessibility journey testing out dictation systems nearly 20 years ago, reading out the scripts that were necessary to train them. And so, yeah, I know if you're familiar with them, you'll be familiar with the sort of down the rabbit hole stories from Alice in Wonderland and all of the scripts for training Dragon and IBM via voice back in the day. So those tools made a huge difference to my life. They were instrumental in me actually being able to do my masters and have fostered a career in assistive technology and accessibility for the last couple of decades. I think that, again, as you say, scale is important, because these were niche tools. Actually, speech to text has been pretty good for quite a long time, but it's been really bloody expensive. You know, you would pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a single license, and the friction was in the setup. So the microphone quality needed to be good. You needed to have a powerful system. We used to actually build computers specifically to do speech recognition, and you'd have to think about things like mechanical noise interference, so the placement of the fans and the sound card and all this kind of stuff. These days, most ordinary hardware is perfectly capable of giving you good speech recognition results. So that's improving. People are used to talking to their devices. So I think that the barriers to adoption for some of this stuff, not only technological but sociological in terms of acceptance of speech interfaces, are being removed quite rapidly now. So we're really, I think, on the cusp of real mass adoption.
Hmm.
One of the things that I've always thought was really difficult to do well, because it's really easy to speak at a computer. It's less easy to get it to do what you want. So the speech to text bit's quite easy. The getting it to correct the text bit is quite difficult, and the controlling your machine by voice is another order of magnitude more tricky, in terms of doing the more complex stuff. So I think that for me, I'm lucky. Really, the only thing I really need it for is text composition. But do you think we're close to seeing more in terms of being able to speech control your PC? Obviously we've got Cortana, and we've got Siri, and we've got Alexa, and all of these other virtual assistants. How deep do you think that integration is going to go over the next few years? Do you think we'll be able to automate a lot more? And because obviously that's going to have a massively positive impact for people with disabilities.
Oh yeah, I think we're just starting now. I can only speak to Microsoft. I mean, the other industry, the industry in general, like you said, is obviously moving forwards and very quickly now. But from Microsoft's perspective, yes, I do expect in the coming years. Right now, we're just getting the basics of call it dictation, and Cortana can do some things, but that'll get more and more improved, and being able to control Office with your voice in a more powerful way, and Windows. That's all definite areas that we are investing in and we'll see improvement in the future. It's just a matter of time, and I think now that voice is getting so prevalent that it's not a if, it's a when. And the other thing, just to mention, we recently made these big announcements about a week ago at the Made by Dyslexia Summit, but one of them for speech to text was that we're bringing a dictation. Actually, it's in the process of rolling out right now. I think it's rolling out globally in the next week or two. But Word Online, so our free web version of Word and our free web version of OneNote, we're both adding dictation to both of those apps. And then in 2019, we'll be adding it to Excel Web and PowerPoint Web and Outlook Web. And I would like to mention that because I'm sure you are aware of this because you guys are all up to date on stuff. But there's a lot of people out there who think Microsoft Office means Word desktop and I pay money for it. And we have free web apps that are free to any person and any school. And we're rolling out lots of capabilities in our free web apps, including speech to text. So it works on any device at that point. So we're continuing to roll speech to text more and more in our other products and platforms. And actually, one other thing I want to make sure I get in from Antonio's question, because I thought of this as I was about to talk about speech to text. That same announcement last week, we also, back to languages, we announced that we're bringing real-time translation into the Immersive Reader on all of our different platforms. We announced that last week. That's rolling out probably in a month or so. So what that means is if I'm in the Immersive Reader in Word or OneNote Online or on the iPad or Teams, wherever, I can have all my text, and in the Immersive Reader change and choose another language like Spanish, and I can flip the entire document, meaning text-to-speech, syllables, parts of speech, picture dictionary, all flips to Spanish for the whole document. Or I can even just choose by word. So I've got English text, maybe I'm a non-native speaker or English language learner. If I choose by word, now I can click on my English document to get a picture, and it'll show me the English word and the Spanish word, and I can listen to them each out loud and see that picture at the same time. And then also later by sentence. So I'll be able to real-time translate an Immersive Reader by document, sentence, or word. So I just figured I'd throw that out there too, in many languages.
That's really cool.
So can we expect one day Cortana to become our language coach?
Maybe. I can't speak to what Cortana may or may not become, but I think that's a great idea. I think Language learning is a huge area. I'm at the International Dyslexia Association conference right now, and a popular topic is this, and this is for the United States, but I'm sure it's similar to different countries. If you're a non-native speaker in a country, you're already learning the language, and guess what? A large number of those people are going to be dyslexic as well. So now you're a dyslexic second language learner, and that is a double hard thing to have to do at the same time. And so if we can bring these real-time translation and language learning features into our learning tools and apply the same techniques that are helping with reading and dyslexia, there's not many companies out there that are able to do that. And that's why I'm excited we can really help a whole population that I don't think people think first thing they think of a non-native speaker is dyslexic also, but turns out there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah. No, I think that's really, really true. I also think about the business population. So you have huge amounts of, particularly English, because people use English as the business language. So within our own organization, we've got 120,000 people, of which probably only a fifth of whom English is their native language. So 80% of the population of our company would benefit from learning tools or reading tools or support for English as a second language. So I see really huge benefits for tools that can help people with language, not only just in terms of comprehension, but also in terms of composition as well. Because we see it all the time. You've got we're united by one broken version of English, because for the most part, you've got people, and then the lingua franca is English, and yet you've got 10 people in a room, none of whom for whom it is their first language, who could all do with the help to arrive at a sort of common definition and clarity and everything else. And certainly if we're doing sort of document creation and review, I can see this being of real benefit to organizations that sort of across the world. So I think it's exciting times.
And one of the things also is that when you have one of the things with education in our tools is when you graduate, and assuming you go into the workforce, then having tools that move with you where everything's built in is just a benefit if you need these tools and extra assistance. It's not that I'm in school, I use some specialized tools, and then I go to the workforce and I have none of those tools anymore. It's more like they can travel with you into the workforce.
That's a really interesting point, because I used to work in the education sector, and we used to provide all of these tools to students, and they have wonderful amount of kit. They have all of the assistive technology, the support, everything else. And there are grant-based systems in the UK that would allow you to get these tools when you go into work. But what we saw was just this sort of cliff that would fall off in terms of uptake and use of the technology. So they would be out of the closet with their dyslexia or their disability in university and in the education system, and they would go back into the closet when they went into the employment market, because they were nervous about disclosure. They were concerned that having a disability might mark them as different, or that they might not get a job, or that they might not get promotion, etc. So there was a real reticence to get what they were entitled to have, and so again, integration, reduction of stigma really comes into play, and hopefully will have a long-term benefit on people's careers, because they don't feel like they don't feel like they have to declare straight away, but also over time, I think we'll be creating a different mindset in general, where we're creating a kind of environment where people are more comfortable about using these tools and more comfortable about talking about dyslexia, neurodiversity, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, etc. Because there are technologies that are commonly available that enable them to be successful. And so we're not only destigmatizing the tools, but we're destigmatizing the neurodiverse conditions as well.
Absolutely. We agree.
So, yeah. So tell me a bit about the International Dyslexia Association conference. What are the hot topics other than sort of technologies that you're expecting to see over the next few days?
Yeah, well, I'm here at the conference. It's in Connecticut. I would say one of the topics, I mean, the theme is at least one of the big panel themes was, can we know what we know? Meaning there's a lot known about dyslexia now. What are we going to do about it? And so I think, at least in the United States, there is definitely a push on, there's different legislation happening in different states where around dyslexia identification and screening at an earlier age. And there's still a lot of passion around, not every school in the United States thinks about dyslexia in the same way or even identifies dyslexia in the same way. So I think there's some frustration still of how can we get that more widely known and widely disseminated. And there's a real big push on teacher training. A lot of teachers graduate from teaching colleges, so pre-service, not necessarily getting a lot of background or training on dyslexia or reading disabilities or related areas. And so it's not their own fault. It's just the college might not be really focusing on that. And so they get into schools and they don't have all of that background. So there's a lot of focus on how can we help improve the professional development around dyslexia and reading and getting that widely disseminated. So that's been some of the areas that I've seen a focus. And the other one I'm really excited about, I had a total fanboy moment yesterday, which was I got to meet Sally and Bennett Shaywitz. Are you familiar with Sally Shaywitz and her work? She was kind of the seminal leader in the world of dyslexia. She's a doctor. She's done for decades. She's worked with Congress members. She's helped get legislation passed. She's written some of those popular books in the history of dyslexia. She's helped untold numbers of people. She's a chair at the Yale University of the Dyslexia Center. But she came, her and her husband, they're a bit older now, both doctors. But I got to have about an hour and a half long discussion with her yesterday, which was just amazing. And walking down the hallway at this conference, every single person at this conference would come up. I was like walking with a rock star because they just come up and say, Sally, can I hug you? Can I take a picture? Can you autograph? And it was pretty amazing because they know she's helped so many people. So it was amazing to meet Sally and Bennett Shaywitz.
No, it's quite interesting when people who help others reach that status. I think it's much more enjoyable to be in a session like that and have people like that go near you when you are near them than if you were with a movie star or someone like that. I think it's quite rewarding that's my feeling about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. I think that the Shaywitz is not so well known in the UK. We've had our own sort of whole dyslexia culture, and we've got the British Dyslexia Association. Certainly can attest to all of the same kind of things. They've been pressing for mandatory dyslexia education as part of teacher education, teacher training, and so on. And there've been numerous government reports, like the Rose Report, addressing dyslexia in the education sector. So I think it's really important that we bring together this stuff across national divides, across language divides, and everything else. I think there's some really interesting areas to consider around cognitive accessibility when we look at some of the issues that are not so much around reading, but around memory and how we perceive stuff, which I think is really interesting and affects how we use products and services, and sense of time, for example, especially with people that are dyscalculic and money and all these kind of things. So there's loads of stuff where I think that some of the machine learning and artificial intelligence and digital assistants can really bring great benefit to people in the future. So I'm really excited about that.
Well,
And I'm
actually,
really
we just announced also that we're going to be focusing more on dyscalculia. I won't go into too much detail, but that's an area that we announced last week of starting to look into that space more as well. So there you go.
well, that's fantastic because I know a bit about this stuff because I was involved in creating the first online screener for that
Oh,
a number of years back, and I did a lot of the work for the W3C Cognitive Accessibility Task Force, particularly on dyscalculia. So it's an area that has been so massively overlooked and
hmm,
has such a huge impact on people because, if anything, the stigma of innumeracy is even greater than that of illiteracy. And people hide it. We've got tales of people who luckily in the UK, we have different coloured notes. I mean, you guys are crazy with all your green notes. Luckily, you've got tools now like Seeing AI, which will announce what it is. Still doesn't tell you. It won't help you that much if you just calculate because you still won't have any concept of what 20 and 1 is. Yeah. So there's one lady that would always pay with a purple because she knew it was a big enough note that it would cover most things. So she would have a collection of purples in her wallet, and she would go out. She would pay with a purple. She'd come back with loads of change, and give the change to her partner. Her partner would go and get them changed back up into £20 notes again. And that was the only way she could cope. This has been fascinating. We've reached the end of our half hour. Need to thank, as always, our friends and supporters, Barclays and MyClearText, for helping us keep the lights on and be accessible. And thank you once again, Mike Tholfsen. It's been a real pleasure to meet you, and I'm sure we'll be talking again in the near future. Look forward
great.
to tweeting with you shortly.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It's been great. Really nice talking.